Prince's last Diddy recording played in trial.
The moment Prince's voice filled the courtroom, Diddy's face changed. His carefully controlled demeanor cracked as the final recording of the legendary artist echoed through the room, a ghostly testimony from beyond the grave. What was in this recording that made one of music's most powerful figures lose his composure? Day 3 of this explosive trial just revealed evidence that nobody saw coming, and the implications are sending shockwaves through Hollywood.
We get physical. That one male guy who did things with Diddy and Cassie said he witnessed him get physical. Don. So again, we talked about how the domestic charges aren't, what he's being, what he's on trial for. But boy, it's stacking up. And I feel that the jury is going to take that into consideration.
The first Diddy party I went to was at Prince's house. So you want to go to Prince's house to the Diddy party where Tyrese is performing and Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher are swinging on swings. That is what's happening on the other side of the wall. And so the one thing that makes this party different than a Jamie Foxx party or any other celebrity party that wrangles a bunch of young women or guys or whatever too, is that Diddy didn't let you bring your security in the party.
Tao Day 3 started just like the two before it. Journalists rushed for the best seats, celebrities slipped in through side doors, and legal teams arranged their papers with practiced precision. But something felt different this morning. The courtroom wasn't just full. It was electric security guards stood at every corner of the room. That's normal for a high-profile case, right? Except today, they doubled the usual number. 4 officers positioned themselves directly behind Diddy's table. Something they hadn't done on previous days. A court insider later told me they received special instructions that morning, though nobody explained why Diddy walked in looking unfazed. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, nodding at supporters in the gallery. And even flashing that famous smile, his legal team surrounded him like a protective shield, whispering strategy. As they settled in, he looked like a man who thought he had everything under control. What he didn't notice was the unusual, the prosecution, reveals Prince's recording activity at the prosecution table. 2 tech specialists quietly set up equipment that hadn't been present during the first 2 days. They tested connections and whispered to the lead prosecutor, who kept glancing at Diddy, with what can only be described as anticipation. Something was coming, and only the prosecution knew what it was. The rumors were everywhere. A courtroom reporter told me later. People were texting each other from across the room, wondering what bomb the prosecution was about to drop. We all felt it coming. The judge entered, and after the usual formalities, he paused to make an unusual statement. I want to remind everyone present that regardless of what evidence is presented today, I expect complete composure in my courtroom. His eyes lingered on the gallery for a moment before adding, any disruptions will result in immediate removal. The prosecution's opening statements that morning followed the same methodical approach we'd seen previously. They reviewed testimony from the previous days, connecting dots between witnesses and evidence. It almost seemed routine until the lead prosecutor suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Your Honor, at this time, the prosecution would like to present critical audio evidence recently authenticated by our forensic team. She approached the bench with a small black device in her hand. The defense immediately objected, claiming they hadn't been properly notified about this evidence. A heated sidebar followed with Diddy's attorneys gesturing emphatically, but the judge ultimately ruled in the prosecution's favor. The evidence was properly disclosed. In discovery, he announced the prosecution may proceed. That's when it happened. The prosecutor turned to face the courtroom and delivered the words that changed everything. What you are about to hear is the final private recording made by Prince, Rogers Nelson, before his death. The room froze. Journalists stopped typing. A collective intake of breath echoed through the space. Prince, the musical genius, the icon.
I'm trying to listen. I mean, there's a lot of this stuff that I've heard and seen already. I'm really trying to connect the dots here and think like, damn, what if Prince was letting Diddy, like, what if he caught wind of some, I'll just say allegedly, stuff that Diddy might have been doing? That seems to be, like, I ain't talking about consensual things, I'm talking about illegal things or whatever. But I'm just like, would Diddy be that dumb to, like, not think that Prince, this celebrity, has cameras in his house as well? So I'm just trying to think, like, because if Prince has cameras and he's recording stuff, you know, to get some dirt on Diddy, I don't know. I feel like Diddy, with all his cameras that he allegedly had, or no, they actually found cameras.
Problems?
That I don't know, right? What I know is that he was really health conscious. He was a vegan. He didn't abuse alcohol. I didn't know of him abusing drugs. He worked out, you know, so, you know, that also really concerned me, because it made me think that, wow, so you mean you do all these things to take care of yourself and you die so young?
Sired, what you're about to hear was recovered from Prince's private vault, the prosecutor announced. The courtroom erupted into whispers. People leaned forward in their seats. Journalists frantically typed on their phones. This wasn't just any evidence. This was Prince speaking from beyond the grave. The prosecutor explained the recording was made just weeks before Prince's death in 2016. This was never meant to be heard publicly. She said, Prince created this as insurance documenting what he witnessed firsthand. When Prince's voice first played through the speakers, a woman in the third row actually covered her mouth and cried. It wasn't just the shock of hearing him, it was his tone. Prince sounded worried. His voice was low, almost secretive, completely different from his confident stage persona. I'm making this recording because I don't know who to trust anymore, Prince began. The quality was crystal clear. You could hear him taking deep breaths between sentences. He wasn't singing, wasn't performing. This was Prince in his most private, unguarded moment. What happened next changed the entire atmosphere in the courtroom. Prince started naming names, specific dates, locations, and at the center of it all was Diddy Prince described. Parties at Diddy's homes in the Hamptons and Miami. The exact same parties that 3 previous witnesses had already testified about. I watched Diddy's face as the recording played. Within seconds, his confident expression collapsed. His eyes widened. His lawyer tried whispering something to him, but Diddy just stared straight ahead, completely frozen. Prince's voice grew more urgent as the recording continued. What happens at these parties isn't just wrong, it's criminal. He said, I've seen how they operate. I've seen who's involved. I've seen who gets hurt. Each word seemed to hit Diddy like a physical blow. The power of this recording can't be overstated. Prince wasn't just confirming what prosecutors claimed, he was providing insider verification that nobody could challenge. You can't cross-examine a dead man. You can't intimidate him into changing his story. Prince described a specific party in December 2015. He named guests who were there, including 2 celebrities who had previously denied ever attending Diddy's private gatherings. Prince mentioned seeing the usual setup in the private rooms upstairs, describing details that matched exactly what the prosecution had outlined in their opening statements. The courtroom was completely silent, except for Prince's voice. Even the judge was leaning forward, listening intently. Court reporters later told me they'd never felt anything like it. The collective shock was almost physical. I tried talking to him about it. Prince said on the recording I told him this had to stop. He just laughed and said I should mind my own business if I wanted to keep working in this industry. At that exact moment, the prosecutor paused the recording. The timing was perfect almost. Theatrical. Every single person in that courtroom turned to look at Diddy. His composed facade had completely crumbled. His face was ashen. His hands, which had been perfectly still on the table throughout the trial, were now visibly shaking his lead. Attorney placed a yellow legal pad in front of him, presumably to block the jury's view of his reaction, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. The moment Prince's voice identified him, Diddy's carefully constructed wall of confidence collapsed. completely.
Such a big deal back then is ever since my third album, I wasn't really taking large advances from the recording companies. I was recording the albums myself in my own studio. So the way I looked at it, I owned the work because I paid for it. And I did all the work. I created it, so I felt like it should belong to me. That said, the companies felt otherwise. And they would always hold this contract up and say, well, you signed it. And I say, well, I understand that. It's not like I want to leave. I just want to, talk about this thing and see if we can't make it more fair. Of course, they wouldn't change, because if they changed, they wouldn't really exist. And that's kind of the situation we're in right today. They're not going to exist much longer. But it's not like we're against them or anything like that. The idea is that we find better ways of working with one another. It shouldn't be a situation where they own the album or the work. We're talking about intellectual copyright. If they're going to be indeed a delivery service, then that's fine. But even FedEx doesn't say that they own the thing that they ship.
Cassie Ventura on the witness stand for a fourth day in the federal criminal trial against hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. The defense continuing cross-examination this morning, confronting her with dozens of her own messages, many explicit, hoping to convince the jury she was an eager sexual partner who matched Combs's desires. I'm always ready to freak off, one message said.
She was into the freak-offs herself and was like a willing participant and was into all the freaky stuff, and essentially that was the crux of what they were trying to do yesterday.
And do you think they proved that or not?
I mean, there's texts like that from 2009, I'm always ready to freak off. There was some other texts where she was referencing like hitting him up about the FOs, is what they were referring to him. To me, like, yes, this doesn't look good, but at the same time, I think the timeline is crucial here. And these are texts from 2009, man. That was when they were first getting in the relationship. She was young. Obviously, they were in the honeymoon stage, and she was stoked to like, oh my God, I'm with Diddy. I'm living this lavish lifestyle. Of course, she's going to be saying things that she knows will curry favor with him to keep.
What truly stunned everyone wasn't just Prince's words. It was watching Diddy completely fall apart right before our eyes. For 2 solid days, he'd been the picture of control. When accusers pointed fingers directly at him, he remained stone-faced. When damaging photos appeared on screen, he whispered calmly to his attorneys. Not once did he show a crack in his carefully crafted image. But Prince's voice changed everything. As the recording continued after that brief pause, Did's transformation was shocking his attorney. The same high-powered lawyer who's defended countless celebrities placed a hand on Diddy's forearm, a standard move to keep clients calm. Diddy jerked his arm away so violently that water spilled from a glass on the defense. Several jurors visibly reacted, exchanging glances with each other. The man who built an empire on his cool, collected persona was unraveling in real time. A courtroom sketch artist later told reporters she'd never seen someone's physical demeanor changed so dramatically during testimony. Diddy's breathing became heavy and irregular, so obvious that people in the back row could see his shoulders rising and falling rapidly. His eyes darted around the room like he was searching for exits. The judge never took his eyes off Diddy. As an experienced judge who's presided over countless high-profile cases, he clearly recognized the warning signs of someone about to lose control. Diddy shifted in his seat repeatedly, then reached up and loosened his tie with shaking fingers. He leaned over to his legal team and whispered something with such urgency that 3 of his attorneys huddled closer. Prince's voice continued describing a private gathering in Beverly Hills. He mentioned a specific date, March 9th, 2016, and an address that prosecutors had already documented in earlier evidence. The moment Prince said that address, Diddy suddenly stood up, not slowly, not carefully, but abruptly, like someone had pulled him up by invisible strings. 4 security officers immediately moved closer to the defense table. Diddy's legal team grabbed at his suit jacket, trying to pull him back into his seat. Their expression showed pure panic. One attorney frantically whispered in his ear, while another tried positioning himself between Diddy and the jury box. The recording kept playing. Prince described walking into a room where he witnessed behavior that matched exactly what prosecutors had outlined in their charges against Diddy. His lawyers looked desperate now, practically climbing over each other to calm their client. Then it happened. Diddy completely lost control. "That's a lie," he shouted, his voice echoing through the stunned courtroom. The outburst was so sudden and loud that a reporter in the front row visibly jumped. He wasn't even there. That never happened. The judge immediately banged his gavel order. "Order in this. Court." He fixed Diddy with a stern glare. "Mr. Combs, control yourself, or I will hold you in contempt." The courtroom fell silent, except for Prince's voice still playing through the speakers. The prosecution's strategy became blindingly obvious in that moment. They had deliberately saved this recording, holding it back until Diddy had settled into a false sense of security. They waited until day 3 when his guard might be lower to play the one piece of evidence that would crack his carefully constructed facade, and it worked perfectly.
That the Diddy's team tried to do was show how they had breaks, and she was with Michael B. Jordan and was with Kid Cudi for a minute. But during that time period, she was still having freak-offs with Diddy, and I think that was them trying to show, this wasn't a controlling thing. Here she was, hooking up with other people. She just was into the freak-offs.
I kind of buy that, to be honest.
So...
she's out of the freak-off scene. She is... when she's with Kid Cudi, or allegedly with Michael B. Jordan, she's kind of out of the freak-offs if she wants to be. So why do you keep going back? Yeah. I know it's kind of like a mental,
yeah.
She still loves Diddy. Diddy was jealous about her.
Oh, yeah, because that was another thing that the prosecutors were trying to do, is show that, that they had a very jealous relationship. She would get jealous when he's with Kid Cudi. Also, Kim Porter, Cassie would be jealous of Kim Porter.
Right.
Trying to show that, Cassie, you were in love with this guy. That's why you were jealous.
Right.
So, this was a real relationship.
It was just interesting to see Chris Brown.
I mean, he's always coming up somewhere, dude.
He is.
Chris Brown.
All right, final story of the week. Justin Bieber is not a victim of Diddy. So this was one of those rumors or whatever that was flying around in the months leading up to the trial. And to be honest, there was quite a few rumors flying around, was there minors involved? Says if no other celebrity was part of freak-offs, why are they in hiding? Are they in hiding, though?
I don't think they're in hiding. I just think other celebrities didn't want to insert themselves. No one wants to be tied to Diddy one way or the other.
Even if you're at a white party, just having a lot of fun, one of Diddy's white parties, you don't want to be linked in any way.
No, and that's why, all those people, there's a few people I think that have come forward and been I didn't see any of this freak-off stuff.
After the judge restored order, the prosecution resumed playing Prince's recording. What came next shocked everyone in that courtroom. Prince hadn't just made vague accusations. He had detailed 3 specific allegations that cut straight to the heart of the case against Diddy. Prince revealed he'd been secretly documenting concerning behavior in the music industry for years. "I keep everything," his voice explained. "Dates, times, who was there, what happened. I've been doing this since 2007. Legal experts in the room exchanged glances. This wasn't just random observations. This was systematic documentation from one of music's most meticulous minds." The first bombshell came when Prince described parties he attended at Diddy's homes. "These aren't just parties," Prince's voice explained. "They're calculated events. I watched him separate young artists from their teams, get them alone, and put them in situations they couldn't say no to." Prince specific Beverly Hills property, and described a room layout that matched floor plans already entered into evidence. The courtroom was completely silent as Prince continued. He expressed deep concern about how young artists were being manipulated. At these industry gatherings, they come in thinking this is their big break. Prince said, "By the time they realize what's really happening, they're already trapped. I've seen it happen to at least 7 artists directly." The second allegation focused on a direct confrontation between Prince and Diddy. "I approached him at the Grammy after-party in 2016. Prince stated, I told him I knew what was happening and it needed to stop. He laughed in my face and said, 'You might be Prince, but you're not untouchable.' I took that as a threat." Diddy's attorneys frantically scribbled notes. as this played clearly blindsided by this revelation. Perhaps most damaging was Prince detailing financial transactions between Diddy and several individuals who were allegedly paid for their silence. Prince mentioned specific amounts: $2 million to one person, $1, $3 million to another, that perfectly matched financial records the prosecution had presented earlier in the trial. "I've seen the payments," Prince stated. "I've seen the NDAs they signed. This isn't just rich people behaving badly. It's systematic and calculated." The precision of Prince's knowledge suggested he had access to information that only an industry insider could know. As the recording continued, Prince's voice grew more somber. "I'm making this recording because I'm afraid to speak out publicly. The power structure in this industry protects people like him. Nobody wants to believe what happens behind closed doors." The recording ended with words that sent chills through the courtroom. "If anything happens to me, make sure this gets to the right people. This isn't just about protecting myself. It's about protecting everyone who hasn't been able to speak up." When Prince's voice finally fell silent, the courtroom remained completely still. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. The prosecution had just accomplished something extraordinary. They had turned Prince into their star witness from beyond the grave. The lead prosecutor simply stood and said, "No further questions, Your Honor." She didn't need to say anything else. Prince had done what no living witness could do: speak without fear of consequences, revealing secrets that had been buried for years.
Their notebooks in their hand, they're coming in, they're very alert, and I think this is one of those testimonies where you have no choice but to pay attention and almost be flabbergasted, obviously, at some of what you're hearing, because it's not only just insight into somebody's sex life, but the details are disturbing at times, especially during that prosecution testimony when we saw some of the alleged abuse, or we saw pictures of her after a beating of some kind, according to her. But the jurors are definitely paying attention. I don't see anyone that's not keeping their focus on Cassie Ventura, and also I noticed them taking notes a lot of times.
And the children, as they were exiting court yesterday, 2 of the girls were seen crying. How emotional have they been in court?
Again, I cannot imagine if that was my father or somebody close to me up there and having to hear details of their sex life. Those are young women. They lost their mother, one of them, the twins. So no one can probably quite understand what it is that they're going through, but I think that's something that you think about on both sides, you know, to look at Alex Fine, which is Cassie Ventura's husband, and think about him having to listen to all that's being said about the type of woman that Cassie Ventura was versus the person that's expecting, you know, their 3rd child together now. So whether it's Combs's family or Ventura's family that's there to support her, her brother and her husband, Alex Fine, I think it's difficult on both sides. Seen him taking notes from the beginning. I see him put his glasses on. He gets very close to the screen when they're reading some of those text messages. So he's paying attention.
Now, Ventura confirmed that she and Combs had conversations about a swingers lifestyle, but that the freak-offs, they were very different.
Yeah, so she talked about this idea where I guess Combs wanted her to watch him have sex with another woman. She said that happened 2 or 3 times, but that he mentioned it frequently.
Kim Porter came up today in testimony. What was the significance there?
The defense said early on that this case would be about infidelity, love, and jealousy. And this is where they brought that up today when they brought up Kim Porter's name. The defense asked Cassie Ventura, "Are you jealous, or were you jealous of Kim Porter?" And Ventura sort of contemplated, but did get to this moment where she said, knowing that Combs spent holidays with his family, which meant with Porter, did bother her. And she admitted that. They also pointed out that there was testimony where she talked about being insanely jealous overall as a girlfriend. So, yeah.
We're hearing the judge wants Cassie off the stand tomorrow. Will the prosecution and the defense get equal time?
Yeah, as long as there aren't any additional motions, I think that is the goal, to have her off the stand by tomorrow.
Why do you think that? What's the reasoning behind wanting her off the stand tomorrow?
In the very beginning, Rachel, they told us that she would...
Yars. In 7 seconds, Diddy's outburst transformed the entire trial. The moment Prince's recording stopped playing, his legal team jumped into crisis mode. His lead attorney stood up immediately, his voice almost shaking as he addressed the judge. Your Honor, we request a 15-minute recess to consult with our client. The desperation was obvious to everyone watching. The judge didn't even hesitate. Request denied. The court will continue with the presentation of evidence. He shot a stern look directly. At Diddy, I expect no further disruptions. Diddy's attorneys looked shocked. They weren't used to being denied. These were lawyers who charge $1,500 an hour and typically get whatever they ask for in court. But today, nothing was going their way. Meanwhile, the prosecution team couldn't hide their satisfaction. The lead prosecutor maintained a professional expression, but her second chair actually smiled slightly when Diddy shouted. They exchanged a quick glance that said everything their trap had. Worked perfectly. They had planned for this reaction, wanted it, and now they had it on official court record. A legal analyst sitting 2 rows behind me whispered to his colleague, "This is catastrophic for the defense. They've spent 2 days portraying him as calm and innocent." That image just shattered in front of the jury. The judge addressed the jury directly. "The outburst you just witnessed should be disregarded in your deliberations. Emotional reactions are not evidence, but every trial attorney knows that once jurors see something, they can't unsee it." 3 jurors were staring directly at Diddy, studying his every move after the outburst. Court security didn't take any chances after Diddy's explosion. 2 additional officers positioned themselves just feet from the defense table. 1 officer stood directly behind Diddy's chair, close enough to reach him in seconds if needed. The rest of the day was brutal for Diddy. The prosecution continued presenting evidence that connected directly to Prince's recording. They showed financial records matching the exact payments Prince had mentioned. They displayed text messages from witnesses describing the same events. Prince had detailed, Diddy sat there sweating through his designer suit. His hands trembled so visibly that his attorney passed him a legal pad, presumably to give him something to hold. He declined water when an assistant offered it. By mid-afternoon, he looked physically ill. His facial expression had transformed from confident to cornered. The final blow came just before the court adjourned for the day. Diddy's legal team filed an emergency motion to exclude Prince's recording from evidence, claiming it was potentially manipulated and impossible to authenticate. Given the witnesses' deceased legal experts in the room immediately recognized this for what it was, a desperate attempt to undo what couldn't be undone. The timing of this motion revealed how truly panicked his defense team had become. Emergency. Motions are typically filed only when attorneys have no other options left. As everyone filed out of the courtroom, legal analysts were already making bold predictions. This will be the moment people point to when discussing how the case was lost. One prominent TV legal expert told his producer, "In a single day, Diddy went from looking like a man fighting false accusations to someone who lost control when confronted with the truth." A veteran court reporter summed it up perfectly. "I've covered hundreds of celebrity trials, and I've never seen someone's case collapse so completely in a single moment." Playing that Prince recording on day 3 wasn't just lucky timing, it was all part of a masterful strategy the prosecution had been planning for months. Court insiders revealed the prosecution team had this bombshell ready from the beginning, but deliberately held it back until Diddy started feeling comfortable in the courtroom. They wanted him relaxed before they dropped it. A source close to the prosecution team told me the first 2 days were about lulling him into a false sense of security. This explains why the prosecution's case seemed somewhat routine. During the opening days, they weren't showing their full hand yet. The team spent nearly 4 months authenticating Prince's recording. They brought in 3 separate audio forensic experts to verify it hadn't been altered or manipulated in any way. They knew the defense would immediately challenge its authenticity, so they built an ironclad verification process that would stand up to any scrutiny. What's particularly calculated is how they studied Diddy's previous courtroom behavior. The prosecution team analyzed footage from his past legal appearances and noticed a pattern. Diddy typically maintained perfect control during the first 48 hours of proceedings, but became noticeably less guarded as trials progressed. They literally timed their bombshell to the precise psychological moment when he would be most vulnerable. The prosecution built their case like architects. They started with the foundation, establishing witnesses who could verify locations, dates, and basic facts. Then they added structural elements, financial records, and text messages. All of this was carefully designed so that when Prince's voice finally played every detail he mentioned would connect to evidence the jury had already seen and accepted their presentation. Wasn't improvised either. A courthouse employee revealed the prosecution team actually rehearsed how they would play the recording multiple times. They practiced the exact moment to pause it, precisely when to look at Diddy, and even rehearsed their poker faces when his inevitable reaction came. What makes this strategy so devastating is how they've established Prince as the perfect witness. He can't be intimidated. He can't be cross-examined. His motives can't be questioned. Prince speaks from beyond with a credibility that no living witness could match. The prosecution's masterstroke was timing this revelation for day 3. When media attention in high-profile cases traditionally begins to WN cable news, typically covers opening statements, intensely then reduces coverage until closing arguments. By dropping their biggest bomb on day 3, they guaranteed renewed media frenzy exactly when public interest might have started fading. This wasn't just about convincing the jury a veteran, legal analyst explained. It was about controlling the public narrative too. They just ensured this case will dominate headlines again. As court adjourned, the difference between the two legal teams couldn't have been more stark. The prosecution gathered, their materials calmly occasionally sharing satisfied glances. Meanwhile, Did's team huddled in obvious distress, some making urgent phone calls while others frantically flipped through legal texts. The power balance had shifted completely in the span of minutes, one moment. Diddy was a powerful music mogul fighting allegations. The next, he was a desperate man watching his carefully constructed image crumble under the weight of testimony from a music legend who could speak freely from beyond the grave. As the third day of trial ended, something profound had changed in that courtroom. Prince's voice, clear, specific, and impossible to silence, had done what years of allegations couldn't. It cracked Diddy's carefully maintained facade in front of everyone. The trial resumes tomorrow, but everyone knows nothing will be the same. The ghost of a music legend just delivered the most powerful testimony possible, catching Diddy completely off guard. What's keeping industry insiders up tonight isn't just Diddy's fate, it's what else might be hiding in Prince's private vault. Who else did he name? What other recordings exist that we haven't heard?